Does Gordon Freeman wear a helmet? No, just look, he doesn't have one.
But what about the heads-up display and the head crabs? If there was no helmet, the head crabs would be really dangerous.
Fair enough. So let's take a deeper look. For those fortunate enough not to know, this is a fairly common topic among communities based around Half-Life. I mean, come on, we waited 13 years for a game, and you can only play Half-Life 2 Deathmatch for so long before the madness sets in, so we had to pass the time somehow. There are 4 common arguments used by proponents of the helmet theory. He needs the helmet to breathe in Zen, he needs the helmet to survive headcrabs, he needs the helmet to survive all the radiation throughout the series, and he needs the helmet for the heads-up display. We'll tackle the easiest one first, Zen. There's no reason to believe that the air in Zen isn't breathable by humans. First off, Barney and Shepard in the expansions visit Zen, and they certainly don't have airtight spacesuits, although it can be argued that these expansions aren't entirely canonical. Fortunately, none of the creatures from Zen have any trouble breathing air on Earth, implying that the atmosphere is similar enough to the one they're used to. And if that's not good enough for you, here's a scientist in the original Half-Life just sitting here in Zen without any issues. No idea why or how. All of these dead guys littered around the place probably have the helmet to protect their heads in general, not because they actually need one to breathe. Next up, we have headcrabs. I think people just give these things too much credit. We've only ever seen one actually attached to an NPC's head one time in the series, in this moment in the original. It accomplishes this when the scientist lets his guard down, which would probably be the best time to take a host anyway. Any other time, headcrabs do minimal damage to both the player and NPCs. They're capable of latching onto Alex in the newest entry, though this is rare and they aren't very difficult to remove. They're probably just not that much of a threat. Then we have radiation. In real life, radiation and its effects aren't that cut and dry. You won't get cancer from absolutely anything radioactive, and we can assume the same is true in Half-Life. Now, Gordon is exposed to more radioactive materials than a normal person, and the player can swim around in it for long periods of time without dying. However, we also need to remember that for Gordon, all of these games take place over a very short period of time. The first game lasts about 2 days, the second is played in 3 with a teleporter time jump in the middle, and the episodes take a day each at most. Unless the radiation is extremely strong, I think it's pretty safe to assume that he could last the full week without contracting brain cancer. The most intense areas often cited are the Sector C test chamber and the core of the Citadel, although the former doesn't activate the suit's Geiger counter, and the latter is a big ball of weird combined dark energy stuff, so who knows how that works. The stalkers are running around and they're naked, and they seem just fine. And finally we have the HUD. In Half-Life 1 and 2, the HUD only appears after picking up the suit, implying that it's the source of the information. And if we're assuming that, the most logical place for it to originate from is inside the helmet. That would explain how the player always sees it in the corner of their eye. Let's just pretend for a moment that the Gearbox games don't count at all, because in both Decay and Blue Shift, the player can see the HUD even though their characters aren't wearing an HEV helmet. Well, I'd like to posit a different explanation for the HUD. It's just not actually there in the game. The HUD is strictly there for the player to tell how much ammo and health they have, just like in nearly every other shooter. But beyond that, the HUD in Half-Life could actually be a visual representation of the suit's voice lines. The
vital sign monitoring
and
munition level monitoring
that we clearly see as part of the HUD have lines to go along with them. The only weird outlier here would be the
defensive weapon selection system,
but that could mean just about anything, probably high-tech pockets or something. The games have a lot of unrealistic aspects for the sake of gameplay, like how Gordon's glasses are always clean, his ability to carry all of these things around, and infinite bug balls. Now, I know what you're thinking.
All of these points are just reasons he doesn't need the helmet. They don't prove that he doesn't have one.
Alright, fair point. But here's the thing. Gordon is never shown with a helmet in any Half-Life game. Not once. He appears in Opposing Force and Blue Shift without one, although again, the canonicity of these games is pretty ambiguous. He's almost never shown with one in promotional material or in tie-ins with other games, and as for the main games, while they are entirely in first person, a few third-person commands do exist, and his model never has a helmet. Sometimes it doesn't even have a face. Now if only we had a solid example of an official Gordon Freeman model seen by the player without any alteration to the game in a Valve-made entry into the series. In the ending, Alex gets a brief glimpse of Gordon in the HEV suit. He's shrouded in shadow, but the player can still clearly make out his distinctive glasses and haircut, with no helmet in sight. In the final game, this is some kind of vision the G-Man brings on, but in an earlier version of the ending, the same model was used during the recreated Episode 2 section. As far as I'm concerned, this definitively proves that during the events of Episode 2, Gordon did not have a helmet. And remember, that game is still full of radiation, the headcrabs, and the HUD burned permanently into his retinas. Case closed. Oh, and by the way, this isn't the only point of uncertainty regarding the suit in these games. Gordon ends Half-Life with the G-Man saying this:
As for the suit, I think you've earned it.
But begins the next game without it. It doesn't have visible gloves on the model in the first game, but it does in the second. There's this model in the SDK which does include a helmet, but goes unused in the game itself. I'm willing to bet that I've looked deeper into this topic for this one short video than any of the game's developers ever have anyway. And that's about it. Let me know what you thought about this video in the comments, and share it around if you'd like. Thank you very much for watching.
I will see you up ahead.
Come on, Gordon, crank that thing.